Today, I had the privilege yet again to speak with Scott Walter, who's got an amazing background in robotics and factories and logistics and human ergonomics and all of that kind of stuff. Today's topic was the beginning of the teardown of the 4680 based Model Y with the structural battery pack from Giga, Texas. And Scott, as an expert in this area, had a ton of insights that I didn't even realize when I watched the video myself. So let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I am joined by Scott Walter again today, which is a wonderful treat. We were supposed to do something on Starship, and I noticed that's in your background back there. But breaking news, because of course Sandy Munro and his company have started the teardown of the Austin-made Model Y with the structural battery pack. And as it turns out, Scott is an expert in this area. So we're like, hey, let's have a quick chat about that. So I'm going to start with just bringing up a few screen grabs from Munro Live's video of the beginning of the teardown. I'll put a link to that in the description for people who are interested in knowing. And let us go ahead and start with some pictures here. So yeah, can you see that? Are we good?
Sure can.
All right. So, I mean, you can see I've got a bunch of screen grabs, but I thought this was a pretty good one because it kind of shows the whole deal all at once. So I don't know, talk us through it.
Well, yeah, I think the first thing is that there's a lot of major changes going on here that go beyond the battery pack. And you sort of pointed out yesterday in your video, in which I'm sure somewhere there's going to be like a link up here.
We'll do that.
We'll start talking about that.
Right.
And in that, you pointed out some of the obvious advantages to going this route, and we can kind of go into that in a little bit more detail. And also, I mean, you did a shout out for me. I have to thank you for that, because
absolutely,
I really had, it was sort of an aha, or actually a bit more of an aha moment for me when, seeing them move ahead in this direction. Because if we wind the clock back a little bit, if you go all the way back to Battery Day, in the run up to Battery Day, there's this anticipation that Tesla was going to come out with some big breakthrough in battery technology. And then when it happened and there was no announcement of a breakthrough, everyone was kind of disappointed. But The reality is you don't hang a business plan on a breakthrough. That's just not good for business. We hope this is going to happen. And so what they did is they said, well, let's engineer our own breakthrough. How can we do that? And they realized they couldn't do it in one place. But if you did a bunch of very incremental ones here and there, cumulatively, you would get what would be the effect of a breakthrough. And that just sort of, when I looked at that, I said, oh, this is a marvel of engineering, what they've done. That's the engineering process, the epitome of what it should look like.
Right.
And I think I was so enamored by it, I didn't ask the obvious follow-up question. And the obvious follow-up question is what sort of opportunities does this avail to being able to manufacture, to improving our production processes? What sort of advantages do we have? And that became apparent last fall at Giga Berlin, when they had a picture of that right there in the factory. And as soon as I saw that picture, that's when I slapped my forehead and went, "Doh!" I mean, I should have seen that coming, because that was such an obvious step to take. And the reason is, back in the early 90s, I was involved as an outside consultant for a major German OEM, where they were looking at how to take the dashboard assembly panel and insert that into the car robotically. And it was just this huge challenge in being able to do something like that, because it's already big and unwieldy, and you haven't designed these grippers that are really big, and trying to get the robot to go through there. And as you mentioned yesterday, trying to snake it in and everything else is a very hard process to do.
I'm trying to find, it's really hard to, I don't have pictures of other cars.
Well, they did do two, yeah. They did, and I think sometimes if you look at some of the Tesla B-roll that's out there, they will show some situations where they're inserting the dashboards, and it looks like they've already, let's say, minimized the dashboard in such a way that are already a little bit easier to insert in to the cars than some of the traditional ones that you have. And so that was always a challenge, and there was all this finagling and finesse you had to do to try to figure out how to get it in through, especially when you have the robotic arm and everything else. And we were trying to do that with SCI computers in the early 90s, which weren't exactly fast, and all the detailed data you had there. And what that problem is collectively known as is they refer to that as the piano movers problem. which is a
Right.
really great name for a problem, because I think everyone understands the idea of trying to move a piano in and out of a house and upstairs and like that. It's a real challenge in how you have to move it. Most of us don't move pianos, but we do probably move sofas. And we
Right.
know the challenge of trying to get a sofa from one room to another or upstairs and around them. As a matter of fact, a sofa took a starting role in one of Douglas Adams' books, the Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And
Right.
if you remember, the running gag to the whole thing is that he always had to climb over the sofa that was stuck in the stairwell going up to his office,
Right.
because the movers were trying to bring it on the corner and it got stuck. And then they couldn't figure out how to get it back out, you know?
Right.
And it makes us like, well, wait a minute, if you get it in, you should be able to reverse it and get it out. And he, of course, wrote a little program on his PC, which at that time was like, you know, an IBM AT, if you remember those or something,
Right.
where he's going through and randomizing all those different positions to figure out how to get that in. So it's already a problem that's a challenge. And then you get the dashboard, you get the seats that you're trying to get in through the car door, and
Right.
they may or may not have the car door removed, because, you know, your car door doesn't exactly open to 90 degrees. So imagine trying to get
Right.
something in and out if the car door is there.
Well, I mean,
So,
heck, just trying to get, you know, if you go to Lowe's and buy some big boxes or something, there's,
yeah,
you know, just as a
yeah.
customer using the car, it's difficult to do it.
Yeah, you already know how hard that is. And so
Right.
this is already one challenge of how do you get those things in and out through
Right.
these very
So just to hold up for 1 second, because my video yesterday was very much from a consumer's point of view, and I was like, oh, look how thin this pack is. Look at the fact that they got the seats on here. That's so cool. They've minimized all this stuff. What you're talking about much more is from the manufacturing point of view, which is like,
yes.
look how much better this is for making a car. Like the fact that you've got the seats on a flat thing that you can just, you know, it's very easy to put the seats onto this as opposed to sneaking them through a door.
Much easier.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of steps that goes on there. One is, you know, getting it mechanically fastened on there, and then there is connecting all the adapters that are in there, all the cabling that you have. Right. And it was pointed out in a Reddit post yesterday from Stuart at Munro Live, where he went into a bit more detail. And he really pointed out something that
let me bring that one up. Let me bring that one up. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll definitely. I popped this up right before we started.
This is one of the this is one of the points. It's one thing getting in there. The next step is to then go in and start fastening everything and start connecting everything.
Yeah. Here we go. I think this is the right one. Sorry. I think I was sharing. It seems to, no, that's correct. You can see that, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
sorry.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So yeah, so take us through this. This is actually a really interesting, and there's two pages of this. There's this and then this, so it's two pieces of it.
And at this point, about all the robots can do is get rid of the backbreaking work of lifting that dash panel in there and getting it kind of roughly in place. And then someone's got to go in and then fasten it in place, you know, finish the installation. And that usually means someone crawling in there to do that.
Right.
And as pointed out in there, it's, you know, ergonomically very difficult. You've got all these things, protrusions that are coming out and poking you and getting in the way.
Right.
And it's not the easiest job. And you're always trying to find these connectors that are just out of reach or kind of hard to find or in a dark recess or something. And anyone, just go to your car and look underneath the dash and you will see all these connectors.
Right.
And you can imagine, you know, just try to disconnect them yourself, and actually don't disconnect them yourselves, because believe it or not, those connectors have probably a cycle life of about maybe 2 to 4 connections. And then they may not be, they are not designed to be like the USB port where you can do it thousands of times.
Right.
You know, it really is a couple of times you can do it, and after that, you really are taking a chance that it's going to work. So, you know, already, you know, you get something that's difficult to push in, you've got to fasten everything, access is difficult, and you might question, well, why not just have a robot go ahead and do that?
Right.
Well, it's already challenging enough for a person to get in. It's even more challenging for a robot because you're talking about cabling, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, that flexible automation lowers flexibility.
Right.
And what I mean by that is that the idea of flexible automation is you've got hard automation, where a line is put together and it's just like, you just do one thing, like a bottling line or something like that. So it's an example of hard automation, just does one thing that does it really, really well. Flexible automation is the same equipment can be easily reconfigured to do multiple tasks at the same time, different products and everything else, and adapt very quickly. And robots are usually the centerpiece of that. So they're part of flexible automation. The thing about it is they expect rigidity everywhere else. They expect the parts to be rigid, the location to be rigid. They really don't like things not being where they're supposed to be. And so you will find these, these robots in labs that are able to connect hoses together and snap a cable together and stuff like that. But when you actually try to do it in the field, it just doesn't work because these cables are flexible. They're moving around. It's hard to always grab them right and all. And to drive that point home is, if you remember in Tim Dodd's first interview with Elon last summer, part one, the first half wasn't talking about SpaceX. It was talking about the Model 3 ramp up. And the production hell that he went through. And the production hell that Elon was going through is he was trying to get a robot to do something. And what he was trying to get it to do was to put like this insulation blanket in between these two other things. And it was flexible. He was dealing with a flexible part, you know? And as soon as I heard it, it's like, oh, of course he's going to have a nightmare on that. And that really caused him a lot of problems. So they kind of learned the hard way that, you'd like to have everything kind of fixed and flexible. And that's where a human operator comes in. Is you want to go ahead and do that. So if you want to automate these things, the first thing is you have to make it more accessible for them. And now there's possibilities to do that. Because the one thing not pointed out in that video is they went a lot about the seats, because already you're saying, oh, the seats are just going to be right on there and you lift it up and you pop it in. But before they pop it in, they're bringing that dash assembly straight on up. And then being able to pop it in place. And the rear seats are also getting popped in place. So all these what were really difficult tasks are done very easily in a very open environment. And then as mentioned here, they're just standing up and it's like putting a couple connectors together.
And so the visibility is better, obviously, because it's at eye level, so you can see where the connectors are. You're not, I mean, the older I get, the more I realize how much my body does not like repetitively going in weird positions, so you reduce the repetitive stress injury possibilities from having to be in really awkward positions. Obviously speed things up as well. So so there's, I think, like, what does he say here? With a background, just being an ethical person. This line right here, where he says, his concern is ergonomics, and that's ergonomics of construction, obviously, and stand up and install things rather than crawl around and lean into openings. So it makes a really, really big difference to the workforce and to safety and all of that.
Absolutely, workers' comp, absolutely everything, and the quality you're going to get, because we all know it's a lot easier to work on something out in the open than in a cramped space. So already you're improving the quality, the reliability, also worker safety. The workers will be able to do this more easily. The number of processes that are involved, it just greatly reduces a lot of things that would normally have to be done. So I mean that's some of the things I saw right away when that first saw the seats on. It's like, oh, this is going to be a game changer. It's going to change all of that around there. And I'm sure there's more steps they can do right now. Because now they can come in at almost any angle that they want with that dash assembly. Before it was like, you just kind of want to get it into where we want. Now they can really talk about, oh, can we kind of put in there and do something that things will just sort of latch in automatically and snap into place. And I'm sure after Munro looks at that, because they're the king of fasteners and everything else. They're probably going to come up with all kinds of ideas of like how they could probably pull something like that off, if they haven't already. I mean, we have no idea. They haven't looked at that on the teardown, so I'll be interested in seeing that. But that's kind of what I anticipate, is that a lot of that's great. And this is really just the beginning. It's just the beginning.
I noticed that Elon said that this was like version 1.0 and they had a lot of room for improvement. So, so obviously, I mean, something like, let me just stop and start sharing the other screen again here. This one. Let's see if I can find the right picture. I have a bunch of screen grabs here, but this one was one of the ones that really blew my mind. And it may not look like much, but this is the center console from the back, like if you're in the back seat, and that's the driver's side and the back. But basically the battery pack console, all that stuff pops into place. You slide it forward, screw 2 bolts in down here, and you're done. put a piece of plastic on the back and you're finished. And that's just like, it's like, oh my gosh, that's genius. All this stuff that would have been super awkward, somebody crawling around inside, probably a robot would not have been able to finish it because it would have been really difficult to get there.
Yeah, access is difficult.
Yeah. It's so amazing to think about that. So yeah. So it is something really interesting. The best part is no part, the best process is no process, things like that. So even if the car doesn't particularly look different from the outside, I think what you're saying is like, this is really game changing, like what's going on here.
Yes, it is, because it just opens up all these opportunities to make the process a lot easier. And
Right.
I'm sure there's also going to be a reduction in a lot of parts.
Yeah.
And, I also see that there's potential that a lot of the cables they have there, you may start thinking about, well, wait a minute, these cables are just here so we can connect the dash assembly to the rest of the car when we're all done. Why do we have that? Why don't we just have something we plug directly into?
Right.
Again, that kind of goes back to now that you can sort of have that dash assembly go in at any trajectory that you want, you can start to think about things like that. And then you start reducing your part counts, you start reducing, cabling and everything else. And,
Right.
The shorter the cable, the less resistant. I mean, it's just
Right.
every single reason to want to go down that path if you can.
Right.
And you can already see there are quite a lot of cables that were hanging down that do have to get connected, that right now have to be done manually.
Right.
And
so this is from the bottom up. They were shooting, so they lifted the top of the car off and stood in a big empty space in between and took this picture up. But I did get a shot, I believe, with the here we go. So you can still see that's kind of a jungle of fasteners over here. It's not too bad, but but there are a bunch of clips here. Yes, looks like most of them are pre-done together, but anyway. So yeah, and then there's another one where Corey's pointing up there. By the way, it sounds like Corey and I might be having a little chat on my channel, which is very cool.
Nice.
So yeah, that'll be fun.
That's nice.
Yeah.
We'll see whether he contradicts me. He probably will. He knows a lot about this stuff. No, he's completely wrong about that.
Yeah. No. I think so. So both from a consumer's point of view, just in terms of, I guess, honestly, as a consumer, if nobody told you, you would buy the car and you would drive it off the lot and you would have a good life with your car. Like, you wouldn't know that the car was like attached to the structural battery pack, or that there was a structural battery pack, if you didn't follow this kind of stuff. So this is really more for the economics of what Tesla's doing, for the ergonomics of it, for the profit margins. I guess those are the kind of big ticket items for this.
Yeah, but I think in the end, if you're able to, the end consumer will see the benefit in higher quality.
Right.
The fact that there's greater availability of these vehicles, so you can actually buy them without weight or anything like that.
Right.
And the cost will go down. So you'll see that on the sticker in the end. You also see it in lower maintenance issues that are going to be going on, lower warranty costs, everything else. So whenever you can do that, it just comes down to Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So the more things you have in there, you just invite the possibility of something going wrong. And a lot of times it doesn't have to be a very expensive part. And if it fails, it can be catastrophic to the car.
Right.
It's always been famous about sometimes like these 25-cent parts that fail and suddenly a transmission doesn't work anymore and someone's stranded on the side of the road.
Right. And the problem is, if it's a 25-cent part, but it's going to take 4 or 5 hours of labor to get to it and pull it out and put a new one in. Yeah.
And the decision to do that is because it was cheaper than the 30-cent one that doesn't fail as often. Right. And so, the more you can get rid of those things, a lot better it is. Right. And then the other thing is that doing something like this invites more and more automation down the road. Right. And the other thing is that the fact that it's easier on the workers means the quality is just going to be better overall, because they're not going to be tired by the end of the day. If you're crawling around in there, they keep on saying, never buy a car on a Monday or a Friday or something like that. or probably one that was built late in the afternoon or something. Or late in the afternoon. There's all sorts of reasons that you'll have quality issues if the workers are getting tired. Right. So, there is there's a very strong moral reason why you want to make sure that the workers are able to have it very easy.
Right.
But there's also a very strong economic one. And
Yeah.
Some companies are probably just chasing it on the economic one, but I think, others like Tesla are also saying that, no, there's also kind of a moral component, the reason why I want to do it. And in the end, it produces better products, fewer worker injuries, everything else.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I was looking for this particular image because this, some sort of urethane plastic, it's a squishy sort of plastic. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. I don't know, but anyway, I guess what they were saying in the teardown is that was the only sort of connecting point between the upper part of the frame and the bottom part, the structural battery point. So, which does a couple of things. Number one, of course, is it creates a good weather seal. But number two is that's the place that they're resting on each other. And so, in my mind, at least, you're not going to get like, you're not going to have these parts eventually start scraping against each other and creaking. And I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but like if a car starts making creaking sounds and stuff, it drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it should help with noise, vibration, and sound for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of that vibration will be reduced. Absolutely.
Right. So yeah, and then just a bunch of simple bolts. So I don't know if humans are putting that together right now, but it sure seems like that's a good case for automation. Is that eventually the thing could pop it in and a robot could go and just put
they probably could if they're not doing it already. But yeah, potentially you could do it. The seal is probably being put down robotically.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't think that's being done yet. That sealing is something that robots are pretty good at. Even though the sealant may look flexible. The fact is that the tool is pretty stiff and it just goes around, and you can control that very, very well. So that most likely is done robotically. The same thing in all the windshields, that all the caulking you see around the windshield, the sealant, that's all done. That's also something that's done usually in the underbody. And in one of those processes that Tesla eliminated when they went to the Giga casting. Something else when I saw the Giga casting, the Giga casting probably is more consequential than this. I was screaming from the rooftops, like, you don't know what this means, what's going to happen. And everyone just, they fixate on, it's going to reduce the number of robots. It's like, the robots are a small part of it because you have the tooling, the fixtures, the safety fencing, the PLC programming, the engineering hours that go in to put that all together. That suddenly evaporates and you have this other. And, one of the things is that after you do the spot welding, you're bringing these assemblies together, because I think Corey was talking about that, what did they say? I think in the latest video that in the underbody, you've got hundreds of different pieces of sheet metal that are being tacked together to make the whole thing. Well, a lot of those places, you then have to go in and seal it after the fact to get rid of the fact that you're going to have a lot of intrusion of water going in there, to get rid of the noise and vibration, everything else. And so these robots have to go around and make all these things just because these two pieces of metal came together. And even though they're welded together, they're spot welded together. You now have to have this other thing. You're going to run the beads for that. And you got to do this other spray. So these are just more and more processes that are eliminated when you go to something like the Giga casting that people don't think of as more than that simple assembly.
Right. Yeah. And this is this particular, I can't remember if I think this is the back, but I think that's the back because that's the rear seat. But just, I don't know if it was you, but several people have been saying, wow, they're just making it like a Hot Wheels car now. And that was what, when he first talked about the Giga casting, I was like, wait, I've seen those things around since like the 1960s or 70s when I used to go, make my parents buy me a Hot Wheels. But it's just, we've gone from this big to, huge. And,
I believe the story is something like that Elon or others were looking at one of the Tesla Model 3s that they had for the shop. And the question kind of gave, oh, wow, it looks so realistic. How did they make it? And I was like, oh, it's cast. And then it comes like, well, why can't we do that? And then I've told everyone, it's like, if you brought that up, in a meeting in Detroit, you would be laughed out of the room.
Right.
They would just say, oh, Scott, you have no idea. You don't build cars that way, know? And so the fact that they weren't there and they were naive enough to ask what seemed like really silly questions, and then they actually bothered to pursue it, is something else. And that's the other thing, is that if you remember with your Matchbox, you have the lower, well, what is effectively a skateboard, and you
Right.
pop it off. And of course, what's on top of the skateboard? The seats, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And
So,
then,
I mean, they really are.
like, oh, if you want to get any idea of what they're doing next, take apart a matchbox, and you are going to see the next way they're going to put the car together. I guarantee it.
Eventually, it's all going to have plastic wheels with the little teeny spindly.
Yeah, everything is there, and so
Yeah.
wherever you get your inspiration is great. And I think I pointed out what's so incredible about this genius is that it's so obvious.
Right.
It's
In
something after you
retrospect.
see it,
In
you
retrospect.
constantly you're like,
Yeah.
oh yes, why couldn't I see that? Why didn't I see that? It's the blinders you have.
Right.
And some of it, I think, comes down almost like to Elon's sense of humor,
Yeah.
which is he sees humor in places that people don't.
Right.
And comedians are a type of genius because they will tell a story, and when they come up with the punchline, we're all expecting them to say X, and they end up
Right.
saying Y.
Right.
And when they say Y, they're pointing out this obvious thing that all of us were so blinded to that we could not see it. And that's sort of the essence of creativity. And so when you look at some of, when Elon sees something, he's seeing it different than the rest of us do.
Right.
He's finding
So
that
actually, so you could say a comedian is a disruptive person too, right?
I think so.
So
I think
yeah,
so.
and so like Elon's sense of humor is effectively his way of disrupting the world, and it goes out into this stuff.
It's not a bug; it's a feature.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it really is, and it's something you should sort of embrace. It's like, oh, that's
Right.
how his mind is working.
Yeah.
Is that he will look at something plainly and he'll see something different in it
Right.
that no one else catches.
And I think that's the mark of like when you've got a good design or something, when everybody else goes like, well, duh, that was the obvious way to do it. But the problem is I've not anything like this, but I've designed stuff, and when people in the end say, well, yeah, it was obvious it was supposed to be that, it's like, no, it wasn't. It took a long time to get there, and it's just only at the end that it's sort of confirmed that it seemed like it was that. So yeah.
And again, a lot of times things that are genius are actually very simple. So we hear about Einstein's theory of relativity. Well, I mean, they're teaching it in middle school, so it can't be all that hard, right?
Right.
And if you actually look at it, it was like a page or two. This whole thing.
Oh gosh, yeah. The special theory
like
of relativity was nothing. Yeah.
was absolutely nothing. And the thing is that because he was the only one that wasn't so myopic, because they're saying, well, how can light have different speeds in different frames? Or it just didn't make sense. And they were looking at it the wrong way. And he was the only one to just say, well, what if time is variable? What if that's able to change? And it was like, no, it can't. And then as soon as you do that, and now everyone looks at it, it's like, it's obvious. So I remember when it was taught in my physics class, that was the first thing I said, oh my goodness, how obvious.
Right, exactly.
And every breakthrough is sort of like that. And so, I think, maybe engineers should be stand-up comics, or at least go out there and try to do that and sort of work on the creativity.
That's actually kind of lovely. So, oh man, see, we've come up with a very profound result from this today, which is that a sense of humor may be critical to being like a really, creative genius. And maybe a weird, because he has a very oddball sense of humor, which a lot of us get to share on Twitter, even if we're not his friends. Right. So I'm sure in person he has got to be a trip.
Oh, something else. And I guess the thing that worries me personally is that I understand a lot of his jokes.
Right.
So I'm like, oh no, what does it say about me?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So I feel like we've kind of covered this. So again, for people, who've been watching this stuff, the genius of this, it's going to be really nice for us consumers, because eventually it's going to bring the cost down and the availability up, which is huge. But from a manufacturing standpoint, and certainly if you're a Tesla shareholder owner, these are all really good things, because it means less time, less chance of human injury, which is very ethically good, faster to create the cars, better quality cars when you get done. I mean, we just looked at like if there happened to be an error with the battery pack, the warranty repair would probably, think about how much time it would take to take out a battery pack out of an older Tesla or a full Ford Mach-E. Now this is one of those things they could just do while you wait.
Looks like it's very easy.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And they either take the seats off, or depending upon the age of it and the age of your car, maybe you want new seats. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's really, really wonderful. I just want to thank you again for sharing your, more, I don't know, more your expertise. You know a lot more about this area than I do, certainly. So I really appreciate it. And,
yeah. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. All right. So thank you. And we are definitely going to get to the to the Starship stuff soon. So stay tuned, everybody.
Yeah. And maybe the one thing to point out that we didn't point out in the previous one is the connection between me and you at that point was over Starlink. It was over Starlink.
Yeah.
And this time it's not. I'm in a different location, so I'm using good old DSL.
Right.
So if there's any dropouts or any issues, blame it on that.
That's right. It's not Starlink's
fault. That's one way to be able to compare the two. And I think we've discussed maybe actually kind of going through the experiences of Starlink.
Right.
Sort of how it goes. Because you're still waiting on yours, but I already have mine. So I had to rub that in.
I know. It keeps saying mid 2022, so I keep waiting and waiting and waiting. Yeah. It's mid 2022.
I think I was pretty lucky because I was just waiting for them to finally say, it's available in your area, and it was available in my area. It just jumped right on it. But I still had to wait, I think, 12 or 13 months before it came.
Yeah, I look back. My order was like from early 2021, like April, I think. So it's been a while.
Yeah. So. Oh, okay. So that might be long because there was the additional wait for it to become available in my area. So you tack that on, which is maybe also another year as well. So
So,
but it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. So,
cool. Yep. All righty. Well, anyway, thank you so much, and we will talk next time. And in the meantime, bye-bye, everybody.